Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the new show, Season 2. Mr. Petru, thank you for joining me. I have to say, you are really outdoing me in the YouTube recording studio with all of your get-up now. I mean, what else are you going to surprise us with the next episode? High expectations, but hey, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Hey, just before we begin, I do have something that I just wanted to inform you that the board of directors of Simple Coach Enterprises, the global multimedia empire that it is, decided to get together, and we're putting you on double secret probation just because it seems to be the thing to do with you. So I figure between that and on the boards, the double secret probations are probably warranted. So I just wanted to let you know. So you're going to be walking a thin line now.
Well, I just want you to know that I think that's very fair. And, you know, anybody that is on the verge of causing the entire demise of D3 soccer should be appropriately punished and banished.
Yes, I totally agree. You have that power.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you surprised by that? Were you? What did you? It kind of surprised me. I'm like, wait, what? What just happened here?
I mean, I'm not surprised about getting into a conflict
A scrap.
in there.
Yeah.
I can't deny that has happened. But that one, I went back and read through stuff. Like, I could not find what was so offensive, and then I don't know. I feel like it's so hard to. There's so much tribalism and people, you know, into their own conferences and into their own teams. And if you talk too much about another team or another conference, they got to figure out some way to get it back to their. Like, it's just so. And then people get. And maybe I do too, but people just seem to get hyper sensitive, and
I think that's I think that's a fair assessment. I think you've just wrapped up human nature in a very tight little bow. I do notice, even in this spot, like sometimes you talk about. Again, I try to be dispassionate about some teams, and I'm passionate about the teams that I like. I don't hide that, but I do know it's like you're kind of, you're outside the lines if you're not following. Like, if I'm not just talking about Mount Union, maybe I'm talking about John Carroll. I might be outside the lines, right? Like, I do think that's interesting. So.
No, it's it's a nice little, it's a nice cultural kind of experience it's a microcosm of a lot of things.
Yeah. That's why I think we should go back to paper, my friend. I think we should ditch the whole internet thing as a failed social experiment and just go back to writing letters to each other and just think between the time it's sent and you receive it, you know, all those passions will have been forgotten. And then next thing, it's just a letter.
That's why I wanted to go to Washington Lake, because they had a school of journalism. My original dream was to be like a sports journalist. Like in print.
Yeah.
I'm actually very reclusive. I don't like being out in public. Jackie's like milling around the room.
She does that. She's old and she's partially blind and can't hear, and she'll spin around the chair for a while, get herself dizzy, and then drops, and then she goes to sleep. That's her life, right? Yeah, there she goes.
Sort of like what I do.
Yeah. I kind of do that too. Like, usually about 2 and 3 in the afternoon, I mill around until I find the right place, and I fall asleep for a little bit. So, all right. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, because that was that's the skeleton in the closet, Mr. Petru's social media life. All right. Why don't you start? What do you got for me?
Well, I'll wait till there's a couple of games I want to talk about, but I think we usually do that towards the end.
Yep.
I'll hold on that. and um, and I'm hoping you have a couple things for me, and then I have. But maybe I should get us started off with um, one of our mailbag questions.
Ooh, very good. I love the mailbag.
Right.
I can't. How do they people know your address? Is that from the double secret probation
Well,
thing, or?
it's um, yeah. So you just made me lose my. What was I going to say? Oh, I think we need to do a blooper reel too.
You do? Okay, we can do that.
Yeah, like
It's
some
usually
let them
outtakes.
see some
Yes.
of our outtakes, and
Yeah.
when we're yelling, and when it gets a little ugly, and
You don't know
um,
what you're talking about. All right, cut that.
right, right. So this is from. I hope this isn't the same name I used last time. This is Judy. I
I
think I
think you
said
use
Betty last time.
Sally, Betty or
Sally.
Sally. Sally.
Nice, nice.
nice, nice
Um,
lady.
so this is Judy from Truth or Consequences, New Mexico.
Uh, is that a real
That's an
place?
actual real. That's a real town. I've been there.
Okay.
So Judy wants to know, and this is specifically for Simple Coach. Is there such a thing as referee fatigue? And does there reach a point where it's just too many fouls to call? So teams that actually foul a lot may actually benefit because eventually the referee just gets tired of calling every single thing.
So I am going to say yes. And I do think it's a very real issue, the decibel level of one side versus the other. And I do think you call into question things where, let's just say, there was nobody yelling. Like, if would you call that as a foul? There are instances where you're like, yes, that's a foul. Oh my gosh, I shouldn't call it because I just called four other fouls against them. And as hard as people try, as hard as refs try not to do it, at least at my level, like, you're worried about getting to the parking lot sometimes, And it's like, okay, I'll just try to smooth things over, and you try to find a balance a different way. But I do think if you go into, so here's the thing. I'm going to be really cynical. I'm going to be very, very cynical. Here's the thing.
Is that Muskingum?
Yes, Muskegum Muskies,
Yeah.
which I could talk about if we do the OAC thing. Here's a very real thing. Let's just say, for whatever reason, I am I ref, and I want to ref in a particular place. You know, I want to be on their good terms because it'll guarantee me. I'm sure they make more in college, $200, $300 a game. If I don't want to upset the home team, right? Because I want to keep that gig going. I want them to think that I'm a good referee and I want to come back. And I know that is the case. I've been experienced when being a assistant coach at the collegiate level. I've talked to guys, and I've seen relationships between referees and head coaches. That's a very real thing. And so, yes, I think if the conditions are right, at some point you're just kind of like, how do I get the next 20 minutes over with? And so you'll let things go. You'll sort of wave things off, which is the worst thing to do. But I do think it happens. I think that's a human nature thing. I don't think
Let me ask a follow-up to Judy's question. When a team is up 2-0 or 3-0, or the referee just awarded a PK like 2 minutes before, like, is there hesitancy based on scoreline or based on I just did a PK to like I can't give them another one so quick? Or
no, I don't. No, I don't think that comes into the. Well, I don't think that that would come into play, like a score line impacting that. No, I do think it's like you get in those games where it's seemingly everything is going out of control, and all the tools that you use, whatever you call them, I call them tools, right? Like, so I have the whistle, I have the cards, and then I have the conversations, right? I have the very public conversations. You can't do that, and stand in front of me, that sort of thing. But then you have the running banter between players. If none of that works, and it happens, it could seemingly get out of control, right? The game gets out of control, and you're trying to rein it in different ways. And at some point, it's just too over. I think for some, it becomes too overwhelming in how you rein that in. And that's why you need somebody like really strong-willed sometimes in those games that is just going to be like, I don't care. Because the last thing you want to do is start just whipping out red cards because you're trying to keep it somewhat of the game and not let the referee sort of dictate how the outcome is.
So you don't think unconsciously or otherwise that like if there's a referee makes a call that is sort of even the referee thinks is sort of borderline-ish, then the next like do they? You don't think they think about like trying to kind of even
Oh,
it
I think
out?
that happens. Yeah, like that was you almost like have this like buyer's remorse. I don't think that's anything. Like, you have this buyer's remorse. I'm not talking about the highest level. Don't get me wrong. I think the professional referees try to keep it. I'm just calling. I don't care about what's being said or done. If it's a foul, it's a foul, and they whistle as they see it.
Yeah.
I think at collegiate level, my level, like it just becomes. Yeah, I think it's like, that was kind of a soft call. How do I make up? Not how do I make up for it, but then you see something soft happens to the other, and you're like, "Hey, I'll give it to you. You got a foul," and that's how that's how you make it even.
Yeah.
I try not to get in those situations, but it's just the reality is you can't avoid it sometimes,
Yeah.
right? Especially when people are barking at you. I mean, like this is the other just. I don't think people probably realize, like, the center guy hears a lot of stuff. And I'm partially deaf, and the stuff I hear is just like, are you kidding? Like, you can't, not supposed to impact you, but everything gets under the microscope. I had a father yesterday dancing on the sideline like he was doing a foul throw. Like, what? You're like, dude, it's a throw in. Like, you're not even in it. It's in like his own, like it's half midfield. And he's making a big deal of it. And that's the sort of thing that drives, personally, that's then the stuff that really gets on my nerves is, you know, everything is contested. So every call you make is contested. And you go through a whole game. By the end of the game, it's almost like exhausting. Like, oh my God, I have to justify every call I make. And just so, anyhow, I can go on for about that, but that's an interesting one. So, but I will say, and okay, I'll keep going. But I will say, like, I think there are teams that have home field advantage, not only because of where they play, how they play, all that kind of stuff. They're whoever comes to their games and yells and does all that stuff. But it's also because I think the referee crews that get assigned allow for a certain degree of permissibility within the game to allow that home team to play the way it wants to play. I think that is very real.
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
All right.
Amherst. I think Amherst gets a little bit of that. I think you look at Tufts. I think Tufts gets a little bit of that. Just to think of the Nescacs, right?
Right.
So.
All right. You want to go next, or you want me to reach into the mailbag again?
Go reach into the mailbag again.
All right. So this is what I'm actually very interested in. This comes from Eddie from Ames, Iowa. And Eddie wants to know, I'll just tell you what he wrote. Is it just me, or has time wasting started earlier and earlier
Oof.
like with six to
Oof.
7 minutes left, including taking the ball to the corner. And as a
Yeah.
coach, do you ever worry that sending your players into the corner that often and that frequently is like a potential for a lot of injury? I think I may have asked you this last year, um, but the sort
Yeah,
of
but this time it's
injury.
Eddie. It's Eddie that's asking. It's not you.
Right. Yeah, it's a similar question.
Yes. All right. So yes, it's a thing that's starting to drive me nuts a little bit. I used to get a kick out of it when it was novel. Like you see the goalkeepers catch the ball and they have nobody around. They caught it like right here and then nobody around. And then for some reason they collect it and then they drop to their knees and then they talk to the turf for a little bit.
Right.
Which, okay, I thought it was novel, but now everybody does it and it's like, God, it's just driving me nuts.
Now, speaking of referees, that's like totally out of hand. Like they take 45 seconds
But
off the clock.
but the interesting thing is when they do that, it's it like at what point does the clock start? Right? Like, hey, you
Right.
got 6 seconds, right? Like, oh, so you made a save, all right,
Right.
and you got to collect. You give some time to collect themselves, right?
Yeah.
So, I would say I've never instructed any of my teams to go to the corner because I always said if that's what you're counting on to win you the game, you that's you have that you have bigger issues. So I've
Yeah.
never instructed. I've never been a fan of that. It does happen. I have noticed it happening earlier and earlier. To me, it's just nonsense. And I would say it's like the perfect way to infuriate the opponent to come in studs up on a tackle and break somebody's leg. Easy,
Right.
no
Because I
doubt.
mean, the other team's already totally agitated because
Yeah,
they're about to
absolutely.
lose.
Absolutely. It's like the
I
throw-ins too. It's like the throw-ins, like the guy from a other side of the field. Like, yep, it's all legal. I'm not. That's the worst part. It's all that sort of thing is legal. It just,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's one thing like when you're under 5 minutes, but when that's
yeah.
starting like as soon as the second half, like it's some, Anyway, I think it's gotten, some of these things are probably just us getting older, but it seems like it's getting worse.
I'm not getting older. I don't.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't understand that.
yeah,
No, but yeah, I there's a lot of that sort of stuff, and I don't know where that was learned. That's the interesting thing. Like you don't even see it so much at the again, I would say like people mimic what they see in the professional game. You don't see a lot of that. You do see a little bit of the time wasting, the goalkeeper and the throw-ins. I get that, but going into the corner, I think most teams know like you got to play because at that level they know they'll get a cleat in the on their knee. Right? It's just that's how they
yeah.
paybacks happen. So that yeah. So that's my 2 cents on that one.
All right. Well,
All right.
that
I mean,
wraps up the
between
mailbag
eh,
segment.
between Eddie and Sally was last week or was this week?
This was Judy this week.
Judy, and Sally. Last, I mean, the IE ending names is really. I mean, it's been fortuitous. Hey, I did want to raise one thing with you. I make you aware. I'm not sure if you are aware. This I find to be very, very impressive and runs contrary to everything we hear about college soccer and in particular Division 3. Did you know that Hakeem Morgan at St. Olaf made his debut with the U23 Costa Rican national team?
Did you know that I found that and was the first person to post it on the boards?
You did? Well, that's outstanding. That's why
You don't even visit the boards anymore.
No, I do. I do. I just don't read through half the stuff. It's like so many letters. Um,
No, I thought that was really cool. I think it's October 14th and 17th. He
yeah,
has appearances.
yeah. Which I find remarkable, right? Because we're not supposed to. Well, countries aren't supposed to look to the NCAA, much less Division 3, for potential professional athletes.
Yeah.
You know, and he's a heck of a ball player. I did not know he
Yeah.
was Costa Rican.
I
So
didn't either.
I just wanted to give a shout out about that because that's to me that's fantastic. and and I'm I would wonder. I wonder how he was, how they saw him. I'd be curious to find out how they found out about him.
Hmm.
Because how do you get scouted? Costa Rica, right? Like, how do you get scouted for something like that? Because I know, right? I mean, you're turning professional at a very young age there, and I can't imagine there's a lot of kids who leave
Right.
of that type of potential that go to college in the states, right?
Yeah, you should try to interview him and Gallman like
Oof.
um, together. That
Oh,
would be
that
fascinating.
yeah. My player
Um,
of the year.
by the way,
Yeah,
St. Olaf is like they're coming around the bend. They're like coming down the home stretch.
they. I thought they were a little shaky at the start, but they
Yeah.
seem to be right. They'll get into the dance, and at that point, I think it's right. New season starts basically from that point. And I like the way they play. I think they're exciting team to watch.
Yeah.
While I'm on players, former player, former Marietta player, I did want to give a shout out to Marietta head coach Joe Bergen, who has become now the winningest coach in Marietta coaching history with 84 wins in 11 years, 12 years. Great guy, huge supporter of the show. Big fan of yours. He opposed the double secret probation, saying that he resigned from the board as a result of the decision that was made. So no, but he's a really great guy, and I was like so psyched to see that. And I attribute it all to the blue turf that they have. So
Excellent.
all right. So the one thing I wanted to talk about, unless you have something pressing, is I was just going to talk a little bit about the OAC,
Yep. Absolutely.
the Ohio Athletic Conference. So pretty interesting, especially since I talked to, if you saw the interview with Commissioner Odie of the Ohio Athletic Conference. But so if you watch the interview, 10 teams, perfect balance of a team. There's there are I, it's interesting to talk about it. So the name that always comes up, because they're the blue bloods of the conference, as much as it hurts me to say it, is John Carroll. Right? They've been pretty much a dominant force, whether that was with Coach Dejan Miletovich. I think I said that right. Currently, or people don't realize this was all started under Hector Marinero, who is the indoor soccer professional, really big name, Cleveland Crunch ball player, very good, who embarrassed me a few times when I was playing. They are pretty much the elite of the elite, and then there's this another group underneath them, which is Otterbein, Mount Union, and Ohio Northern. I would say sometimes Capital, that they're chasing. And this year they're making it a go. I would say Mount Union in particular is making it a go. Ohio Northern, I think, will give it a go in the tournament, because they played such a brutal schedule. I mean, it's just a brutal, brutal schedule. So,
Yeah.
and then I would say there's this other tier underneath that sort of comes in and out. Baldwin Wallace is another Capital, which had some good years, and then I just think this year is probably what I would consider a down year for them. And then Wilmington, who had a banger year last year, and then this year it seems like they're a little bit they're struggling. But they all have, except for Baldwin Wallace, Marietta, uh, you know, John Carroll, Coach Dayon is 3 years tenure. Jason Griffiths at Otterbein is 7 years tenure. David Krems at Mount Union 3 years. Ohio Northern's Chris Matej take I can't pronounce the last name. 5 years. So they're all like most of the coaches are very young, which is really positive, I think, for the conference overall. And then the last group, I think these guys, I'll just say there's two more groups. Let me phrase that. There's two that are aspiring and I think that are really focused in on it. And it's more of a commitment that they have to overall athletics. And that's Marietta and Muskingum. Marietta has Joe Bergen, who winning as coach. And then Corey Kirk for Muskingum, who's an OU grad, who was also an OU assistant, is now the head coach there. And I think and if you look on the women's side, Danny Gunderson, Muskingum's putting a lot of commitment into athletics. Facilities, they got their own soccer field, all this stuff that is going on. It makes it a pretty remarkable place. So I would say that those are aspiring, like they're working towards becoming more competitive in the conference at a minimum. And then there's the last tier, which I don't understand, which is Heidelberg. They pretty decent football occasionally, but for the most part, I just think their soccer programs have never, historically have not been the best. And I don't know if it's by design or what have you.
Yeah, I think they've dropped off really badly. They actually were in the what year was it? 2014, my son's senior year. Kenyon played them in the first round of the NCAA tournament. So they were, I think they won the AOC that year.
Yeah.
So they had a few years where they were pretty
Good.
And I think they had a long-term coach. I can't remember his name, but something happened at Heidelberg.
Yeah. So I don't understand that one. That's the only one. But yes, they used to be good. When we played them, they were one of the competitive teams you played, right? And then where Muskingum was the doormat and Marietta to a certain extent, but they were better. And so that's I actually, like I said, from a soccer standpoint, I actually think it's a very good conference. Like if you ever get a chance to watch some games, obviously John Carroll's really good, but Otterbein, they can play some ball, right? And Mount Union is, can't.
I think it's much better and deeper than it. I mean, it used to be a one or two,
correct
bid league, and
yeah.
Now they definitely have more overall strength than like the NCAC.
Yeah.
At this point, they go at least 5 or 6 teams deep.
Yeah, and they could, and any of those teams, excluding any of those teams, can shock somebody, right? Like any of those teams can shock somebody, and I think that's a real positive. I was trying to figure out how to rank conferences. Massey, everything's got a score to it. I was trying to figure out how to rank them, and it got too complicated. And I was like, you're not going to care anyway. So I'm like, hey, whatever. So they're a better conference, right? Like they're not the best, but they're not. They're there. So but yeah. So what's interesting. Here's this. What's interesting is I was looking because I'm sort of on this kick for. Looking at where did the teams play. I know this is terrible, right? But I look at, I look at some of the elite programs and I'm like, wow, where do they play their games? And all but 3 teams, all but 3 programs play on football fields.
You mean in the OAC?
In the OAC. Ohio Northern has a field.
Yeah.
Marietta has the blue turf, which is wonderful. And then Muskingum just built, as part of this commitment to athletics, has built, or at least I think it's a commitment to athletics, has built its own soccer field.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting.
Out of all the football fields, how many can say they're Don Shula Stadium?
Only one, indeed, yeah. Yeah, but how many could say they're Larry Karras Stadium? Only one as well. Yeah. So
Shula
I
was the
mean,
first. He was the first
yeah.
soccer coach at John Carroll before
Yep.
by the way, what was his name? Marinero.
Yeah. Hector
Yeah,
Marinero. Yeah.
Hector. His son
Yeah.
was a great player at
Great soccer
John
player
Carroll.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he was an assistant for, or he might still be. No, he's the head coach at Kent State. I think the women's program at Kent State.
Oh, the son.
The Sun. Yeah. I
Oh
think
wow.
so. Yeah. The Golden Flashes. So he's they always I think it's funny because if you look at sort of where like the distribution of the like you know John Carroll Cleveland, Otterbein Columbus, Capital Columbus, Ohio Northern is unique, but they have such a good reputation academically that I think that's kind of like Kenyans and Kenyon and or Gambier and then Ohio Northern and Ada. But I think the southernmost schools, so the Muskegums of the world, Marietta's of the world, for some reason I think it's a little bit tougher on the recruiting trail. As we talked about this before about where do you recruit from? Because if you go north, you're competing against John Carroll, the Mount Unions, and it's northern. And so where do you go to find your recruits where you might not be in that competitive situation
Yeah.
for players, which is an interesting
Was
discussion. But
Hector a goalkeeper too, or not?
no, he was an outstanding, ridiculous forward.
Because that's another question I have about why so many goalkeepers end up in coaching and like the Oberlin coach played. He might
Yeah,
have played goalie for the Cleveland Crunch, or
yeah.
he had
The
some pro history there.
Oberlin, the men's
Um,
pro.
yeah, Blake knew he went to. He played at Cleveland State, I think.
I did not know that.
But they're
See, you're
so. I mean,
You know what? I always say,
oh
you know
man,
why? Because you spend so much time just watching the game. Like,
yeah,
I think that's what that could be. I know Joe Bergen was a goalkeeper, the Marietta coach. Um, he was a goalkeeper at Marietta. Um, yeah. So I don't know. That's interesting. That's interesting because we're smarter than everybody else. Banged our heads enough times that we believe that we're smarter. I don't
yeah.
know. I didn't know that about the Oberlin coach. Oberlin was another one where it was like, I don't want to, like, yeah, they would be good one year and then they would just be terrible the next.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll look at it another time. So, all right. So that's my overview of the OAC.
Okay.
All right. What do you got?
So the other, this isn't a mailbag question, but it's a little bit similar. And I'm going to tie in a little. These are the creative ways that people figure out how to mention their children on a show. So, in the last time Kenyon lost to Owu in the regular season was 2012. I was there. It was in Gambier. It was 0-0 until like the 60th minute. And then the center back, who was from New Zealand, he played that ball that they constantly play like to the cycling midfielder
Uh
where,
huh.
and sometimes they have one or two defenders on their back, but they
Yeah.
make that, and it's usually, it's in your own third.
Yeah.
And they make that little pass, and most
Mm-hmm.
of the time, the midfielder kicks it right immediately,
Back.
right back to the
Yep.
CB. It's
Yep.
just like a one-touch kind of.
Yep. Yep.
And I don't know what. And I feel like I see people either get stripped or almost get stripped, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a very dangerous spot if you lose the
Correct.
ball.
Correct.
And my son got stripped in that same spot
Mm-hmm.
by a guy named Ben Witkoff, who immediately scored. And so this is sort of the year right before Kenyon's first started their NCAA run of that hasn't ended yet. Um, and so, and my son was, I mean, he was like, you could just tell, like, like he was distraught, like the center
Yeah.
back was trying to like console him, and then 15 minutes later, Colton Blocker, the OWU All-American, like got a header in, and so they won 2-0.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in the tournament, the NCAC tournament, we actually took them 0-0 to PKs, and we lost in PKs. But anyway, I always remember that play, and then anytime I see it now, I'm thinking like, why? What is the like? There must be some purpose, because everybody does it. Like that play, that pass,
Mm-hmm.
and every time Kenyon does it, I'm like convinced they're gonna like, you know,
Yeah.
um,
It's space, right? Like you're to me that pass, the sole intention is to drop it back, unless nobody's on you, and then that midfielder can sense that and he can turn. But it's just ends up being for space, right? You're moving players. You're moving the other team's players in a quite possibly a I don't want to say an unnatural because it's natural, but they're moving out of position maybe. And so that it creates another space that the center back now receives the ball and can look like, hey, he just stepped out of this space. Look, I got this great pass to the forward now, or to somebody else to move it up the
yeah.
field. But
Yeah,
but
I mentioned it to my son a week or two ago. He said it's still like his worst memory in college. Like, and he said, "Yeah, I should have looked over my shoulder."
yeah. Yeah. Did he try to settle it or did he try to do anything with the ball? That's why he got stripped?
I don't think he was trying to do anything fancy. I think he just got like sort of out
Yeah,
physical. Like he
muscled.
just kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a good ball. If you have somebody in the middle who does that well, like what's the what's the kid's name at Kenyon now who has I don't know if he's been hurt or
Oh, Martinez. Yeah, he hasn't played all
Martinez.
year.
Yeah. That kid was good is good. I don't like I said, I don't know if he's hurt or what, but
Yeah, he's out all season.
yeah, he was spectacular at that because he had a sense to him like he knew when to turn and he knew when to give it back. And that's the rub, right? Like you force that play. It's like the run, right? Like the run of the winger. Like the winger's supposed to make certain runs every
Right.
time, right?
Yeah.
And you're just waiting for that one error for the team, right? That's not going to pick them up, and that's when you hit them. That's the same thing with that center midfielder dropping back to receive the ball. You have to do that 100 times or 10 times again, 15 times a game, not because of the 14 times that he's marked, but for the one time he's not, and he can turn and go, right? So,
Yeah,
I,
there's a kid named Ramirez who's very good, but he's doing that role now for Kenyon. And what worries me is that when he gets fouled or he thinks he's get fouled, he
mhm,
has this habit of like doing what we just talked about
yeah,
the GJ's doing, like he
yeah,
falls on top of the ball and like
yeah,
actually grabs it.
yeah,
And I'm thinking like you're not always going to get that call.
yeah, yeah.
Like
So you're
what
just
do you
gonna
you
give
know
him, yeah, yeah,
you're either going to get a handball call there
yeah,
or you're going to give up an easy and final third play.
yeah. That's a good one, though. I like that thoughtful one. I feel bad for your son that it being
Yeah,
his worst college memory.
yeah. Well, he'll make the. I'll throw in one plug. So the Tufts assistant head coach will have memories of 2014 when my son
Mhm.
got a walk-off goal at Denison and
Oh,
the
nice,
second 30 seconds left in 002.
nice. Did he go bonkers?
He
That's
wasn't
got to
even
be.
supposed to. He wasn't even supposed to be in the game. The kid had like started ahead of him, like
Uh huh.
asked to come out, like 5 minutes left in the second overtime. And anyway,
That's
um,
awesome.
yeah,
That's awesome. That is awesome. All right, what else?
Um, well, you want to go to talk about a couple of games coming up,
Yeah, let's do
or
that.
you
Let's
got
do that.
something else?
No, no, no. Let's talk about the games. That's all I got. Like I
All
said,
right.
I for those watching who don't know, I had a really rough week last week, which is why this is delayed. But so, all right, I have my
You
games of
can
the
you
week.
can tell them that I was on probation. That's
Yes, he
fine.
was. That was double secret probation punishment.
Um, I don't want to talk about them too. I'm not really worried about them because I actually really like Bowden's team, but I think they're in a little bit of like they're
Uh,
playing at Colby
yeah.
on Tuesday, and they
Yep.
really need to win that game. And then
I.
they and then they're at Wesleyan next,
Yep.
who Wesleyan just beat Williams, maybe.
I
Um,
think no. Did they beat Williams?
I think it was Williams.
Williams. Maybe it was. Yeah.
At Williams, yeah, it
At
was at
Williams. Yeah.
Williams. It
Yeah,
was
that's
like
right.
this
That's
week.
right. Yeah.
Um, but Bowden's had, they've had a couple of. I mean, obviously, all those games are tough games,
Yeah.
but they're trying to keep up with Middlebury and Connecticut. Oh, by the way, you were dead right about Connecticut last year, and I mean, what a job that coach is. I mean, Ruben Burke.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, he's brought them right back to
They're
where they
so
were.
not the team this year that they were last year. Remarkable.
And and without their two best players, the person I would have considered the third best player hasn't been playing. Rye Jaron,
Uh
the
huh.
last few games he hasn't
Yeah.
played. But yeah, so I got a little bit of an eye on Bowden.
I'm just gonna say I mentioned this in my games of the midweek that I thought this was a game for both teams, right? Colby to stay in it and Bowden to sort of feel like they've made a step in that upper echelon. And I think this is a psychological killer if Bowden can't deliver.
Yeah, Bowden needs to keep pace, and
Yep.
it's also a big rivalry game
Yeah.
in Maine, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and then this isn't the one I really want to talk. But so and then UW Platteville versus St. Olaf is going to be a really good one.
Yep.
But the game I wanted to talk about the most is on Wednesday, which is Western Connecticut at Williams, and I find this game fascinating because it's involves the team that everybody was so upset that didn't get in versus
Yep.
the team every they thought they should have been reversed.
First.
And
Yeah.
Williams went on to the national
Yep.
final.
Yeah.
What doesn't seem fair, not only does Western Connecticut have to go to play at Williams, but they also have a game tomorrow night against Eastern Connecticut. So they're
Yes.
playing back to back.
Back to back. Yep.
So that's a little bit, and Western Connecticut they just lost to UMass Boston, their
Yeah.
nemesis. But I mean, they've had a very good season. I mean, not like last year.
Yeah. But
But
they're
they
playing a tougher
really,
schedule.
yeah.
Yep, they're playing a tougher schedule than they did last year. In
And if they
fairness,
could
right?
get that win, if they could beat Williams,
Huge,
that would be a big win.
huge, huge. That to
But
me puts them that 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 to me could put them into a whatever it is. What do they call it? Pool
Pool
C.
C.
Pool
Pool
C,
C.
right? Like I think that legitimately that's the one too. I was looking at, and I thought again, this is a must for both teams. I think.
Right, Williams is in trouble too.
Williams is in trouble too, and Western
Yeah.
Connecticut as this is the kind of game they need to win to get a Pool C if they can't win their conference tournament.
Right.
So
They need to win the conference, but
they
yeah.
knew, yeah, yeah,
And then, I mean, Cortland at New Paltz will be good. Otterbein at John Carroll
Yep.
should be. Otterbein could really use a signature win.
yes.
Um,
I think that's a must-have for them. Believe it or not,
yeah.
that game.
Geneseo at
Otherwise,
Rockport
yep,
is interesting. And then Johns Hopkins at Washington. Like, Washington College is sort of a sleeper team that
yeah.
still hasn't lost.
I didn't put that on the Washington College Johns Hopkins game. I didn't put it on my list because I don't know. Like they're both. I think Johns Hopkins is going through some growing pains. Right, they lost that Tryman from last year. Right, so it's a big gap, and they're trying to figure things out. So I was like, yeah, and then Washington College, like you said, it's kind of a sleeper, you know. And I just
Right.
was like, that's not a game worth watching, and it's probably could be one of the more exciting games.
Yeah. And
Um,
don't look. Trinity at Colorado College is obviously a good one, but
yeah,
don't look now. But NYU is. I don't know if they're going to make it all the way. I mean, if they win out, they're going to make the tournament. But NYU at Rochester,
I don't see
um,
how they do it.
Rochester needs.
Needs it, yeah,
They both have pretty attractive schedules. Given, I mean,
yeah,
consider they have the bottom end of the UAA left.
yeah.
Um, But Rochester, I guarantee you, Rochester will end up getting in. They'll win the next 3 out of 4. Um, but
And I think they have some good wins along the way, right? Like
they do. They beat Cortland at the beginning of the
Portland at the
season.
beginning of the season.
NYU, and I'm going to give you credit again. NYU knocked off Chicago like a week ago or week and a half
I'm
ago.
telling you. And then who did
Um,
they lose to? No, they tied. They lose. Didn't Chicago just tie? Um,
Brandeis.
Brandeis. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah, so they're. I mean, I still think they're definitely a threat, but you saw that one coming that they
yeah,
weren't going to be undefeated.
yeah.
Um,
I still like it. Yeah, like you can't take it. Who knows? Tournament starts and they're on a different. They sort of reset and
yeah,
everything's out. But they just don't look as smooth as they did last year. I just thought they just sort of looked like this fine-tuned machine. Like never got rattled. Always knew they were in the game, and when time came, they would turn it around and they would go from a 1-0 loss to losing to hey, they're up 2-1, 3-1 by the end of the game. Right? Like it
well,
just
to
sort
give
of
you credit again, it feels like it parallels a little bit, not to the same extreme, but what happened with Connecticut
yeah,
like
yeah,
Connecticut wins the national title,
yeah,
and then they come back and have an off year, even though they
yeah,
still have the talent.
yeah, yeah.
And Chicago still has a
Oh
ton of
yeah, yeah, yeah. The
talent.
kid up top, the Z kids, or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
really. I agree. I agree. Just something. Maybe it's the psychology of it. I don't know. I don't know.
And then on Saturday, I hate to keep pumping the NESCAC, but I love games where you don't that ahead of time you don't think there's either any way either team will lose, so you can't figure out like who's. And I think Tufts at Middlebury is that kind of a
Yeah,
game. Like I don't
yeah.
know who's gonna. It'll probably end up being a draw.
Draw. Yeah.
Um, and
That's a
then
tough game. I tell you what. That's a really. There's a lot. Like, what's the?
yeah, nobody's paying attention to Tufts, but like they've lost
Yeah,
one.
they lost one. I think they're really good. That's a tough game. That's a tough one. That is a
Yeah.
real tough one.
Yeah, I will not be surprised if Tufts wins that.
No, who by a
Uh,
1-0. Yeah, like I could
and
totally see them.
I'm saying that while I'm probably ranking Middlebury like number 2 in the country or
Yeah,
something like.
yeah, yeah. I
And
don't
then
have them that high, but yeah.
Christopher Newport at Washington
Washington
Lee
and
will be a
Lee.
good one.
Yeah,
And then Sunday is like a
that,
full the whole UAA is in
yeah.
action on Sunday.
That's a big deal. The Washington and Lee Christopher Newport game. That's a big deal for Washington and Lee. Like
Yes,
they need that one,
they
right?
do.
Because they've had I'm going to call this, and I mean it respectfully, an off year. Because I just don't,
Yeah. They need
Yep,
what will be a regionally ranked win, and
yeah,
but I think they're still, to me, I've sort of looked at Washington Lee, St. Olaf, and Kenyon as all sort of similar, and I think they're all capable. I don't think any of them are. Um, I think they're all in the good. I think very good is kind of their ceiling,
yeah,
not superstar
yeah,
ceiling. but very good is enough to make a run if you hit everything right.
Yeah.
Um, and then other teams that I think aren't quite there yet, but could be, are like Johns Hopkins,
Yeah.
North Park.
Yeah.
They both struggled more than you would have thought.
Yeah.
And nobody,
Stevens.
Stevens is off the radar, but they'll probably
Yeah.
win their conference,
Yep.
right? And they'll be in the somebody's going to have to beat them.
Yeah.
And they still
Yeah.
got your favorite. What's that guy's name? Bruno
Adam Barrick.
Ambino.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He's still there. Adam Barrical too is like stepped
Yeah.
up in the midfield, goal scoring. Yes, and it's interesting. The regional powerhouse that is Catholic University is the same way. They're not having the most spectacular of years, but they win the landmark or the pay-per-view conference? Yes, they can, and that gets them to the tournament,
Right.
and then all bets are off, right? Like
Exactly.
yeah, yeah, and
Right, and they'll
Stevens,
go,
yeah,
yeah, facing a team that like has like a mediocre. I mean, yeah,
yeah,
that's kind of a trap game
yep,
for a good team. Like
yeah.
they could lose to Catholic or
Yeah, 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 yeah. Just imagine the draw goes their way, which I thought it sort of went the right. Same thing. They just,
yeah,
they just sort of have a sequence of two, like the first round, the two games in the first round, or the first two games, and then the second and or the third and fourth games, and you get the right teams, and somebody shocks, and you get I don't want, like a. You can totally see them making it to because they got the quality. I think you can totally see them getting to the round of 8 or
yeah,
the quarters, right? Like you can totally see that again. I think there's a lot of teams like that. Washington and Lee wins the ODAC, right? Like there's another one. Okay, man, they didn't have. Like I said, seems like an off year for them based on the results, but you get them to the tournament, and again, draw goes their way, and before you know it, you're contending. Somebody's going to have to beat them, and
yeah,
good luck.
yeah,
They're that good. So
yeah. And they got a great coach. And
yeah, yeah, yeah. All that.
all right, here's my last question for you.
Okay.
Assuming that there's a third bid, who do you think will get it out of the Sunyak? New Paltz State or Brockport State? I think Plattsburgh is faded a little
Yes,
bit.
I think so too. That is just wrong on so many levels that you asked that. Let me just take a look.
By the way, Brockport was the other team that I thought, other than Western Connecticut, that should have made the tournament last year. But
I do. I don't think it was as stark though. Like you
yeah,
could, like you know what I
right.
mean. Like they were.
No, it wasn't a snub. It wasn't
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. SUNYAC, here it is. Okay. That's hard. You know what? Because I'm just more familiar with them, and this is my fault. But I would say New Paltz. I think they play. I think they've gotten some good results. I mean, they lost to Oneana on a tight one, and
right.
then they tied Plattsburgh. So and Brockport. I mean, they tied them up as well. So I mean, listen.
Have Brockport and New Paltz played?
Yeah, they played
That was a draw.
last Saturday. Yeah,
Ah,
they was to
okay.
a 0-0 draw at Brockport. The only thing is, on Wednesday, that's a game to watch for me. Is the they host Cortland, so that to me is they're going to decide is a big decider for them, unless they can take the tournament. But
Who, New Paltz, you mean?
New Paltz goes to Cortland, or Cortland goes to New Paltz.
Yeah.
So that's a heck of a game. Hey, a couple of other ones that I'm Yeah, that was one of my game. That was one I picked. Cortland at SUNY New Paltz. I thought is going to be a really good one. A really good game that I'm not going to be able to watch for obvious reasons is Drew at Scranton. Um,
Hmm.
that's a good game. I actually Drew is actually playing a lot more consistently than, and I think they're what's the right word? They're more legitimate. They're not. I thought last year they were a little bit of posers when they went in that 9-0 run or whatever.
Yeah.
I think this year they actually are working and playing well. And I think Scranton's a decent team. So and I think they could repeat in the landmark as far as I'm concerned. And then
Yeah, I
oh
thought Scranton had faded a little bit, but I know
yeah
they had a hot start.
yeah the another one. It's the American Rivers Conference. You know I'm a fan.
You're gonna go Loris Luther.
Luther. Yeah, I was looking at that. Come on. That is
Uh, we, we,
I don't think they like them. Yeah, I don't think they like each other.
no,
So
they don't. They don't.
so
But Luther has struggled, but they could screw things up for Loris for
totally,
sure.
totally, and I think that's totally in line with that.
Yeah.
So I haven't really looked at the Saturday games. So I'm going to take your word for what games are happening on Saturday. But a
Yeah, well,
quick,
one you would like is the two St. Josephs are playing each other. St. Joseph's, Maine is playing St.
I,
Joseph's, Connecticut.
and I think I saw a picture of a shirt that someone has a St. Joseph's hat. Right? Is that right? The
Not a
monks
hat, but
or a shirt? Yes, that's for
um,
next time.
well, just hold on one second. Oh, I must have left it upstairs,
Oh, for shame.
but I don't want to. I don't want to completely disappoint the viewers because I'm never going to wear this one because I don't deserve to because I'm not smart enough. But
Yes. Yes. Caltech, baby. I don't even know what that is. Like all that gibberish there. I don't
and
know
you
what it's.
wanted to talk about their coach.
Yeah, he's absolutely. I'm telling you, I got affirmation from who was it that posted on? I should look, but somebody said, "Hey, Caltech, Caltech," and did the rundown of like how they've done since
Right.
2006, and I'm like,
Kuiper.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm like, undoubtedly coach of the year. I'm sorry, like you cannot not give him the Division 3 coach of the year.
Yeah, Mr. Sager even endorsed that.
Yeah, like he didn't make me think I was nuts.
Yeah.
Like of the decade. Like what? No, I won't go for that far. Coach of the decade, but seriously, here's a guy, first year, second year, first year. He was at Trinity, and Caltech, who has never won more than 4 games that we can historically verify, and he's now 5-2-4, 5-3-4, like just
Yeah.
remarkable. I love
I
that.
can't believe they even have a program.
I don't
Like,
understand the school. Like you probably know more about it than I do. Like it's a weird school from what I've heard.
yes.
Right? It's
And
very
tiny.
small. It's
Tiny.
tiny, and it's super hard academically. That's
Yeah, you
all.
would think you would think their only varsity sports were men's and women's quiz bowl and new and what's the new rage? The video gaming
Oh
sports.
yeah, esports.
Yeah, yeah, esports.
But they've won 6 games.
It's
Six
amazing.
games. And I mean I can't
Yeah,
speak highly enough of Duncan Gillis. Like I can't like look, at some point you just got to take your hat off and be like, "Hey, I won the national championship. I went undefeated in this season, but he had the harder job." And you got to give it to him. Like I don't know. That's my vote. So what does that gibberish say on that shirt?
I have no idea.
Okay. All right. So I'm not dumb. So if you don't know, then I'm like, okay, I'm not. At
I
least I
can't
can't.
I can't testify that you're not dumb, but
Yeah. Yeah. That's true.
I can testify that I'm dumb. Um, but
That's
can
great.
I, because this has gone so well every time, like, can I
Yes.
try one last Hail Mary on the nostalgia TV stuff?
You certainly may.
And we can end with that, maybe?
Yes. Let's
All
end
right.
with that.
Okay. I want to know, and you don't have to rank order them, just give me your favorite
All right.
between uh, Perry Mason.
Oof. The original. The
Yeah.
What's his name? Yes.
Dragnet. Hawaii Five O.
Oh my gosh.
And Get Smart.
Oh my gosh. All right. I will answer this, but first I have a question for you. What did Perry Mason keep track of in his drawer?
Oh God. I didn't even think you were old. You were old enough for Perry Mason. What was it? I don't know. What is his name?
I, I'm visualizing him. I keep thinking Orson Welles, but it's not Orson
It's
Welles.
not Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. Um,
Perry Mason.
you're
I'm
probably
looking.
too young for this. There was a show called The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Do you remember? You don't
Oh yeah, I
remember?
remember that one. That was Raymond Burr.
Oh, absolutely, Raymond Burr.
Yeah, Raymond Burr.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you my ranking, because I've watched all of these. So my favorite, all time favorite. I mean, it's one of the shows that I just love the most. Is Get Smart. Obviously, the most unserious of them all.
Yeah.
But who can't help but laugh at the shoe phone, or the intro, or the intro when every time he turns around to walk through the door again, it closes in on him and he snaps his nose. Like, come
Yeah.
on, like that's just quality. Number two,
He was
as
Steve Carell before Steve
you've
Carell.
correct, yeah, yeah, totally. That's actually I never thought of that, but that is actually very true. I am then going to go with, believe it or not, Hawaii Five O. I was a big fan of that. That was what was the that became a reality TV show the last few years called like Cops. No, what was the 911? What was the reality show where they followed around cops and dangerous? So I was a big fan of Hawaii Five O. Then I'll go with Perry Mason. I was never Dragnet. Really, never did it for me.
Yeah.
So big fan, big fan. Get Smart. That's a good one. It totally not in character with the other three, but yeah.
If I was going to guess, should I guess that your lead into this show is going to be Get Smart or Perry Mason?
I don't know. Well, let me answer your question because it's he used to count. Didn't he count bottle caps of the beers he drank? No, or something like the. Anyhow, maybe I'm thinking of a different show. Yeah, that which wouldn't surprise me either.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. That'll be a good question. It might have to be the Get Smart. Might have to be
Or
Get
or
Smart.
or Eddie from Ames, Iowa.
Ames Eddie for me. I'd have to find a good picture of Eddie.
Right.
All right, Mr. Petru, brother, thank you
Okay.
for today. This was fantastic, as always. I don't know how we pull this stuff off, but it is a highlight. It really is for me. It's such a great time. Such a great time.
Well, thanks for having me again.
All right. And keep working on your studio because it gets better with each passing week. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, you got to get one of the see like I do. I don't know if you could see it in this.
I can't wait till I could get off this GPS ankle bracelet they got me wearing now. But that'll help.
Yeah, that'll help. You got to get one of the pointy foam fingers that fan fingers that you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you got to get one of those for your background because you ain't a
Okay.
fan unless you got one of those bad boys.
I got to get some of that tricky lighting you've got.
Oh man, go to Lowe's, my favorite place. Pick up the lighting. Sticky, so it doesn't. You don't have to nail it in. You could go to town on the lighting. We could compete. Who has a better lighting setup?
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
Super True. Great seeing you.
All right. Take it easy.
All right.